without doxology, and no doxology without theology. That means our praises in the church should be wrapped in the Word of God, be an expression of the Word of God. But it's important for you as students in a theological institution, because I went to seminary as well. The danger is when we're busy learning and reading and memorizing and writing papers and taking exams, it's too easy to forget or not take the time to praise the God that we are learning about, to bring in theology, and to not let it burst forth in doxology is a terrible mistake. So let me encourage you to always take that time and be sure to let your theology turn into doxology, to praise Him for the things that you're learning about Him here at the school. Amen?
Amen. Why should we worship? Whom should we worship? Who is welcome to worship? Where should we worship? And how should we worship? And then we answer the question, how do we build and maintain teams within the ministries of our church? So for those that are working toward developing themselves to be leaders in the church, whether it is to be a senior pastor or we in the United States have worship pastors, people who are in charge of helping to design and implement, put together the worship service and to lead that service. So a worship leader or a church musician, how do we put teams together to help the congregation to worship? And so we look at that as well. How do we increase the participation of the congregation so that when they come to church on a Sunday morning, it's not just about watching someone worship, but it's about engaging my heart as a church member in worshiping the Lord.
The final aspect of those experiences of worship is sending them out to visit churches, visit different kinds of churches. They don't all have to be in our narrow theological lane, but let them be exposed to different worship practices, different denominations, different ways that God's people do worship. So, and then in the final area, of course, as we've already mentioned, encouraging the students in their personal life to be personal, to have personal walks of worship. Encourage that of all students, so that, because that's important, because then when they go into churches as pastors, they need to teach their congregations the importance of having a personal walk of worship as well. Because you may know, people tend to think, well, I'll come to worship, I'll come to church, and the pastor and the worship leader will provide worship for me. When actually it's supposed to be part of the daily walk of every healthy Christian. It's not to come to church empty and let the professionals fill us up, but rather coming to church out of hearts full of praise and thankfulness to God because we've been walking with God all through the week. And then when we add our hearts and voices together, it becomes something even more powerful and special. Now, sometimes any of us, all of us, will come to church empty and God can meet us and fill us. But the normal pattern for a healthy Christian is to be walking that walk of personal worship, which will then guide and empower and make rich our corporate worship experiences as well. So in the theological institution, these three areas I mentioned, that the emphasis, the doxological worship emphasis throughout the seminary program, remembering what it's all for, which is the praise and glory of God. That's why we're all doing what we're doing in the institution. Second, some focused instruction on the biblical, historical, practical aspects of worship, and then giving our students worship experiences both inside the institution and outside the institution as well. And if we do that in training future pastors, pastors will be better equipped to guide their churches in these areas. And by strengthening our future pastors, we will inevitably strengthen the churches that they go to serve as well. Because, as John Stott said, again, no theology without doxology, and no doxology without theology.